Hallo, hallo. He cannot hear you. But
Hi, nu wel weer. Nu hoor ik er iets.
Ja, we hebben ook de microfoon aangezet.
Yes, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is is Garance. I work at Lime, and just wanted to say that we applied for the bike sharing scheme in Nijmegen, and that we look forward to be able to operate hopefully in the city of Nijmegen, and looking forward also to listening to you today. So maybe we can connect afterwards, but we are already in relationship with your teams.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, my colleague does the overall shared mobility, and I'm only responsible for the eHUBS as such. But
okay.
So he'll be the main contact point. But good to sort of meet. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to join, but well, it is what it is.
It's good to see you on the screen, and we'll continue the discussion with your colleagues, and it's very interesting to see the developments with the eHUBS, and the fact that you're going to lean onto that even more.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Hi,
Karen.
How are you?
Doing well, how are you?
Fine.
Good to see you.
Hey Jasper.
Hi.
Hoe gaat het?
Ja, goed op zich. Alleen positief getest. Ik ben verder niet heel ziek of zo, maar dat...
Nee.
Dus ja, dat krijg je 3 keer gevaccineerd en in maart nog corona gehad. Dus het is dan, dan...
In maart
dan zijn
zelfs?
de klachten.
Wow.
Ja, dus dan zijn de klachten nu niet zo heftig. Dus, maar ja, mijn vriendin is wat zieker, maar dat gaat ook nog allemaal wel.
Ja, ik heb ook net gehoord van iemand die ik vorige week heb gezien dat hij positief heeft getest. Ik ben nu aan het denken van, heb ik nu ingebeelde symptomen of echte symptomen? Ik denk dat ze voorlopig nog ingebeeld zijn, maar goed.
Ja, dat is altijd, hè. Als je het dan hoort, dan krijg je meteen een kriebel in de keel. Dat is, ja.
Maar het zou wel lukken om te presenteren dan.
Dat lijkt me wel, ja.
Oké, prima. We wachten nog... Ja.
Ik ben Lisanne trouwens. Ik zit achter de knoppen daar.
Hallo.
Dus is alles voor jou in orde?
Ja, ik denk het wel. Ja, publiek hebben we nog nodig.
Ja, Paula is beneden een rondje aan het doen.
Ja, dat is goed. Ik ga even kijken. Jasper, ik denk de volgorde die voorzien is eerst Dreux en dan zijn jullie het, Nijmegen, en dan Manchester als derde. Is dat goed?
Helemaal prima.
Okay, welcome back. So after lunch, and we'll have the second round of pilot city presentations now. Again, looking at what's been happening in the eHUBS cities, what they have been doing, first of all, how they have assessed the activities so far, what are the lessons learned, how are they moving forward. That's basically what we will be discussing. After listening to Leuven, Kempten and Amsterdam this morning, we're now moving on to the next three cities, which are Dreux, Nijmegen and Manchester. And we'll kick off this session with the presentation and the results from the city of Dreux. Martin, the floor is yours.
Yep. Hi everyone. So I'm Martin. I'm working for the city of Dreux in France, and I'm being part of the eHUBS project since 2020, approximately. So maybe just to begin, remind that the city of Dreux is really we are working at a different scale than, for example, the other pilot cities. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I was saying Dreux is a really specific city in terms of density and population. We have 30,000 inhabitants, and so we are quite a small city in France. So the issues and the problematics we have to face are really different from, for example, the experiences in Amsterdam, Manchester, and Nijmegen. It's a bit more similar than Nijmegen for those who have assisted to the presentation of Nina this morning. And so we, we have two eHUBS services in Dreux, one e-bike and one e-car service. So the first one, the most important for us, is the e-bike service. So it's running since February 2021. For the implementation process, we chose the top-down approach, which was easier for us to implement. And so we implemented 3 Mobi points. So that's the name we chose to label our eHUBS in France. And we implemented 15 e-bikes and 3 e-cargo bikes. So you can look on the maps. They're located on the city center. Our first plans were to implement 6 eHUBS to connect the neighborhoods mainly, and to allow people to reach the city center from surrounding neighborhoods. But finally, we deviated from the plan. So that's it for the overall presentation of the bikes. So to give you an overview, after a bit of more than 1 year of service, we have approximately 0.18 rentals per day per vehicle. So that looks quite small, but when we are comparing those numbers to similar cities, to similar French comparable cities, we are quite like in the middle range of other medium or small cities. So it's quite okay, I would say, for our city. Even if it's not, there is no like viable business model. So we are fully subsidizing the services. So that's really something to keep in mind when you're implementing the hubs. And obviously, we have more rentals during summer. For example, we can see in June, July, and May last year, it was really a lot of rentals. So in terms of repartition of the uses of the bikes within the day and the week, most of the uses are during the weekend and in the afternoon. So our guess is that most of the use are for leisure activity and not for modal shift. And that was our objective, to target those modal shifts. So that's an objective that's not been reached. So we're guessing as well that people are not using the bikes to shift from the cars to a bike, but are more like using the bikes for leisure activities and so on. So it's not really that interesting for us in terms of objectives. We have also 2 duration types, or most of the people are taking the bikes for short rides, less than 30 minutes. This is our first range where you can rent the bikes, and the other 50% is from medium to long rides. Yeah. And so this is a comparison between our 3 stations. So we can see that it's fairly balanced. So we are quite happy that the location determination has been quite okay in density and close to several services that helped us to make we think a good choice within the station, even if the one is a bit less used than other. So that we are quite happy with that. In terms of profile of the users, so you can see on the right-hand side that the distribution of the users is really concentrated. We have, for example, 20 users, which are responsible for more than 50% of the rides. So that's quite an interesting information. And our mobility provider, Greenon, gave us recently some data on the profile, for example, the medium age of our users, which is 21, so that's quite young, and that's just like confirming what we could see and on the field. And last, on the technical state of the vehicle parts, we had a lot of problems and difficulties at the beginning of the service, with approximately 30 to 50% of the vehicle parts unavailable. So that was really an issue for us, because the spare parts of the bikes were really difficult to find for our provider, but we worked a lot with them, and this is really important as well, the exchange you can have with the mobility providers to improve the situation. So now we have 85% of our park available, so that's really better, and we're really happy with that. We have to face some degradation and bikes stolen, so 2 e-bikes. It's really difficult to face this situation, because even if we have a fixed station, so with electrical grid and power directly connected, you can't prevent those degradation, unfortunately, even if we worked a lot with our municipal police and other department of the municipality, but it was really difficult to prevent that. And our e-car service, so we implemented the service in 2 eHUBS at the city center of Dreux with 3 e-cars, and we decided just recently, last month actually, to stop the service after 1 year of operation, because users were lacking. And so the reporting was really clear. We had only 8 users registered. And for example, the average revenue for the mobility provider to be profitable was up to 600 euros per month, and we were at 91 in average. So that was really far from the minimum required to become profitable. So our policymakers at the municipality chose to stop the experimentation. And so the lessons we learned within this service was that there was really no need of this service up until now in Dreux. We are really a car-dependent city, and people are not used to shared mobility services. So for now, they're mainly using their own car, and it's really difficult to change that. It was really also difficult to find a profitable business model for private companies. So we were subsidizing as well all the service, and the earnings were not for us, but for the private company. So for the city, that was also really a big cost. And we also think that the locations chosen at the beginning were not that convenient and appropriate, because lack of visibility. So that's what we learned from this experimentation. In terms of communication and nudging, we launched and we developed a pretty classical and traditional communication ways through our social medias, the municipal newspaper. We edited some flyers, posters, and other communication tools. But that was, I think, also a bit lacking on our side to promote the uptake of the eHUBS. So that's also a lesson and a good advice for replication cities to really put some efforts on uptake and on communication and behavioral change. So future plans. So I think it's maybe the same thing for other cities, but our operating budget in the municipality is really restricted by higher energy prices. So our municipal councillors are trying to find budget savings everywhere. So that's also a reason why we decided to close the e-car service. So our further implementation of the 3 MOBI points for the e-bike service has been abandoned. So we won't connect the other neighborhoods. We will just restrict ourselves to the city center of Dreux, which is obviously not that convenient to reach, for example, the house to work trips. But the e-bike service is working very well for now. But as I said already, it has a low impact on commuting journey, so we will have to wait like a full year operating in 2022 to then decide if we want what we want to do with the service. But yeah, our opinion is that it's not really an alternative to private car, and yeah, so we will wait for the final report at the end of 2022. And as I said, the e-car service has been removed because, yeah, the service was far from reaching our objectives. So a bit more about the overall lesson learned. So it's really important when you're discussing and experimenting to implement eHUBS to really think about the viable business model. For example, in Amsterdam, in Nijmegen and other big cities, you can find some business model viable with the mobility providers. But for small and medium cities, the question is really until what point you are ready to subsidize and to consider this shared mobility service as a public service relying on fundings, on public fundings, and until what level of commitment. So our municipal councillors decided that for the e-car service, for example, the return and the usage was really not enough. But that's really a big question for replication cities, we think. And also to define a precise target objective. Our objective of targeting commuting journeys came a bit afterwards, so I think we were a bit lacking of reflection and on thinking on this precise objective. So it's really important to conduct a proper evaluation at the beginning of the project and not during the project. It's really important to be careful of the dimensioning of your eHUBS, the number of eHUBS you want to implement and the number of vehicles you want to put in place to avoid oversize. And that's maybe what we did a bit for the e-bike service. And last, the visibility of the hubs is really crucial. For example, as I already said, but our e-car MOBI points were not really frequented because it was not on the good side of our train station, for example. So that was a bit difficult to overcome this issue. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Any questions? Yes?
Yes. Hi, thanks for your presentation. And I recognize many of the points that you see for smaller cities. We also have problems being profitable in smaller cities. But what I do see I'm from Cargo, so we do shared cargo bikes. What we see in what you describe in the kind of usage, mainly being leisure, we see that as a point in the development curve, or in innovation curves, and this curve is different for every city. But what we see is every city where we start, it starts with leisure use. So when we put the bikes there in the beginning, people use it in the weekend with sunny weather, and they go to the beach or they go out making nice tours. But after some time, and that's not a few weeks, but that may take a year, then you see what we see, that people start making it more part of their daily life and using it for shopping and for their daily logistics. But maybe the expectation level of the speed of adaptation is too high, and we have to realize that it takes considerable time to change from a leisure way of using to a more functional way of using. But we do see that happen. So I wonder, maybe you need a bit more patience. So that's my question, is are you going to wait for that, or do you already have the conclusion that it doesn't add to your goals?
Yeah, interesting question. I think we have to wait, but we also have to connect the neighborhoods. For example, if we want to just like go further than just leisure activities and tourism, and that's where we're kind of stuck, because it's complicated to consider going further into the implementation phase. We abandoned, for example, our 3 additional hubs, Mobi points, because of financial constraints, and I think we think that's preventing us from reaching those commuting journeys. So we're kind of blocked. But I agree, it's always take time, and people are also discovering a new way of. We are far less familiar with those sharing services than, for example, in. I don't know if in Amsterdam or in other cities that are more used to just like bike. I think in our city, bike journeys are just representing 3% of the displacement, so it's really low. So it's really also working on the culture, and yeah, that's not easy.
More questions?
Yes, thank you, Martin, for a nice presentation. And I was wondering, what are the do you think are the arguments that people don't use car sharing in Dreux? Is there a problem, like parking places, or do you have to other reasons why they maybe don't use it?
We don't really know, because we haven't conducted a proper survey with the 8 users that were using the car service, but we really think that it's like everyone has a car in Dreux when you want to go to another place, so it's not, I think, in the culture, and I think also that the density of the city center is not enough to. For example, we were targeting families that could have less than 2 cars, for example, just 1 car, and then another one just to go to for weekends, and so who would be willing to abandon 1 car, but it hasn't worked, and the exchanges we had with our mobility provider, which is called Cities, which is really present in a lot of French cities, but bigger cities like metropoles. It's also a question of density, and you have to reach a certain level of inhabitants so that it becomes really interesting for people.
Thank you, Martin.
Thanks.
Let's move on to our second speaker, who sadly cannot be with us in real life, Jasper Meekes from the city of Nijmegen, who unfortunately tested positive for COVID and didn't want, of course, to spread around the virus at the conference here. But we're very glad, Jasper, that you feel well enough to join us remotely. So over to you to present the results from Nijmegen.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll share my screen so that you can all see the presentation as well. So it should be coming up now. Yeah, I see it is. So I'll quickly go through the lessons we learned in Nijmegen and Arnhem. Arnhem is our sub-partner city, and so the results from there are included in my presentation today. First of all, let me tell you something about Nijmegen and Arnhem. So Nijmegen is a city of about 180,000 inhabitants. Major employers include the university and also the University of Applied Sciences in Nijmegen. And Arnhem is about 20 kilometers to the north of Nijmegen and has about 165,000 inhabitants, where it's the provincial capital. So the province is a large employer, and also the University of Applied Sciences, which is shared between the two cities. The two cities are part of what we call the Green Metropolitan Region, which consists of 18 total municipalities and has about, well, almost 800,000 inhabitants. So if we then look at the eHUBS project, the eHUBS project in Arnhem and Nijmegen consists of 14 different eHUBs. There's 11 in Nijmegen and 3 in Arnhem. We have cargo bikes from Cargaroo. There's 30 at the moment, and we're looking at expanding that number in the near future. We have electric cars that are shared through Umber, and they are available on demand. So that means that there's no set limit to the amount of vehicles, but if you reserve a vehicle, then it will be provided at the eHUBs. And then we have electric bikes from Deelfiets Nederland, which at the moment I think is at about 20 electric bikes. We still really hope to expand that number in the near future. For the cargo bikes, we use also a neighborhood model. So there's a cargo bike available at every single eHUB, but in addition, they have in a sort of ring between a number of eHUBs, they have cargo bikes available on every street corner, so to say. So every 400 meters or so that people, if they find that the eHUB, the cargo bike closest to them is not available, then they can go to the next one that might be a few hundred meters away. So very recently, so last week, Umber switched to a sort of free floating system for the electric cars as well. So now those are available throughout the city. So not only at the eHUBs, but the eHUBs still are sort of a gateway to this shared electric car facility. So then if we look further, then I'll go into how we planned the eHUBs first. So what we did in Nijmegen and Arnhem was really to take a flexible and adaptive approach when it comes to our eHUBs. So we were pragmatic with our choice of locations. We chose locations where we knew we had the space, we had the availability of facilities to place these eHUBs, because we really wanted to see how it worked, and we didn't want too much. We didn't want to spend too much time on the planning part. We also started with the less permanent design, which made us very flexible in terms of the specific location. If it didn't work, we could easily move it away. If it needed to be in a slightly different spot, we could relocate it, etc. And we can build on from that. And so we implemented improvements during the project. So in terms of design, which I'll come to later, and in terms of other things, we were able to try and switch it based on our experiences and try and implement improvements throughout the project. The eHUBs in Arnhem and Nijmegen have been open since the 15th of June in 2020. Here on the left, you see a picture of the opening where our alderman opened one of the eHUBs. We started out with Urbi electric bikes, but they were later removed. I'll get back to that in a later stage as well. And one of the major factors, of course, in the entire eHUB planning was COVID-19. So we already delayed the opening, which was planned for April in 2020 up to June. But of course, throughout that entire period up until now, we've constantly had issues with lockdowns and all sorts of other measures, which meant that the usage of the eHUBs was affected really by these national measures in terms of COVID. So then, if we look at the eHUBs design, we started out with a sort of simple design, but we've gradually moved further. And what you see here is also the coloring scheme and the signage that we've used. So we now have a large pillar that shows you step by step what you need to do to rent a vehicle at the eHUBs. We have smaller posts to which the cargo bikes are attached. That's also combined with a street print that is used to show where the cargo bikes go. And we've done a lot of things to try and make the eHUBs as visible, as easily visible as possible to anyone walking by. Then one of the things we felt from the start was really crucial to making the eHUBs project a success was the communication side. So we really invested a lot in communications. We hired a specialized bureau to help us with that, and they designed a logo. They designed a brand image really And here you can see some of those examples. We had an extensive billboard campaign that you see on the left here, with billboards all over the city, that introduced the eHUBS project, but also that later tried to persuade people to use it. We had a flyer campaign with people living in the vicinity of the eHUBS project. We have a website that is sort of the gateway to all of the mobility service providers. We included an instruction video on that website as well, and we also targeted that on Facebook to specific target groups to try and let people know how they should and can use the eHUBS. And we've had an extensive campaign on social media as well. You see some of the Instagram posts down here, where we also share some facts and try and really focus on the values and interests of people who might be interested in using the eHUBS, and the vehicles available there. Another aspect of our project was the behavioral change side. Also for that, we hired a specialized bureau to aid us in making that as concrete as possible. That was done in cooperation with the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, who's one of the project partners. And together we developed a number of interventions to try and change behavior, and to try and see what we could do to increase eHUB usage. So one of the things was the eHUBS design. You see here on the left, you see a picture of what the eHUBS design looked like, and you see that that's been redeveloped to make it more visible, but also to make it more clearly, to potential users what they need to do here, and really give a step-by-step process of how this is done. I talked about the instruction video as well, which was geo-targeted around the eHUBS. Now we're also using a contest sort of where people can win an eHUBS trip or credit for an eHUBS trip in an electric car. So that's also something we're trying to do to persuade people to try and use the eHUBS. And a lot of these interventions have been done in an experimental design, where we implemented interventions at a number of eHUBS, but we also used a number of eHUBS as control locations. So we didn't implement the eHUBS at those locations yet. And we tried to see if there was a difference in the user numbers. Unfortunately, there were so many other factors involved with COVID measures, with vehicle availability, with all sorts of issues, that really looking at the user numbers didn't always give a very clear indication of what the value of the intervention was. But for instance, for the eHUBS design that you see on this slide as well, it was clear that also from the interviews that were done with people around the eHUBS, that the improvement really was valuable. And so after that, we implemented that at every eHUB. Then if you look at the user numbers, then you see that we have seen a slight increase throughout the years since June of 2020 in terms of user numbers. Cargaroo had a limited availability of cargo bikes at the start, and from August last year they increased the number. And well, you see the seasonal influence as well, but we've seen that for May the user numbers really are on the rise, and we're hoping to really continue that trend and see if for June and the months coming we can really see higher numbers and increase the usage. The shared electric vehicles from Amber, you see that that has a quite constant usage, and with almost 700 trips per month, that's something that we're also quite happy with the way that's going. You do see that there was a dip back in October, I think, which also had to do with vehicle availability, where they had a time where private users couldn't easily reserve a car, and it was only available to commercial users. But fortunately, that's now changed as well. Then at the start, we had Urbi as one of the partners who shared their electric bikes, but they abandoned that scheme some time ago because they had a lot of issues with vandalism and theft. But when they started, we had very, very high usage, but then as soon as the problems with theft and vandalism started, the user numbers really decreased. And now with Deelfiets Nederland, we're seeing that we're really still in a startup phase, and we need to add more bikes and more visibility to make it to make it a product that's far more usable. So here you see that it's only at 77 usage per month for the total of all 20 bikes. So that's not a lot in that sense. So we're hoping to increase that as well with more availability of bicycles and etc. Then if we go to the challenges, I mentioned the COVID-19 issues, so lower user numbers due to the lockdowns, changing circumstances, which made the evaluations more complicated. Then theft and vandalism really was one of the issues. You see here on the left, you see a picture of one of our eHUB signage that was attacked with fireworks. On the other image, you see an Urbi bike that was dredged from the canal. So all of this not only led to issues with the bike's availability, but also to a lot of negative publicity, which harmed our project. Also, vehicle availability in general has been an issue where we've had issues with some of the mobility service providers, in also COVID related, that they weren't able to provide all the vehicles needed. And that, of course, led to users not being guaranteed that they could actually have access to a vehicle when they needed it. So that made it, that also really changed the way that people use the eHUBS. So we saw that in user numbers, once this really became a problem, that the user numbers really started to decline. Also, charging infrastructure proved one of the most difficult things in terms of planning the eHUBS and realizing them. Getting that in place. And so especially with the cargo bikes that work with the battery swap system, that was a lot easier to implement. But for the electric cars and also for the electric bikes, getting charging infrastructure in place in public space was often quite difficult. Then if we look at what the lessons learned are from our project, I think one of the main things is that it's very good to be flexible and adaptive. So our pragmatic approach, where we started small and then built on from that, I think that is something that was very successful and was very useful in our project. I think that for the project, it's very crucial to have an active role of the mobility service providers, because in the end, they are the ones that put the product on the street. We as a city don't feel that is our responsibility. We try and facilitate that as much as possible. But when it comes to vehicle availability, service levels, and robust systems, the role of the MSPs is, of course, very crucial. And then when it comes to our role as a municipality, I think we're very happy with the way we invested in communication and behavioral change. I think that is crucial to making it a success. And I think we do see that the user numbers in Nijmegen and Arnhem are perhaps higher than might have been the case without these extensive campaigns in terms of communication. We also do see that the user numbers and especially the site visits and that sort of thing really increase every time that we have a new communication campaign. So in that sense, we see that there is a link in that sense. So yeah, I think that's that. And then we're looking at the coming months. So what's next? So the pilot still runs till the end of 2022. In that time, we're trying to expand the number of users, expand the number of users and also the vehicle numbers. We're looking at maybe adding Bondi bikes to the project when it comes to the locations in Arnhem. So that's another electric bike scheme, and they're now active in Arnhem, and we're seeing whether they want to be part of the eHUBS project and whether that's they will fall under the eHUBS flag or not. And we'll be using the testimonials from the contest we have, where people can win a trip in the electric car, using those testimonials from users also in our communications and trying to attract more people to use it. In the meantime, in both Nijmegen and Arnhem, we're rolling out other shared mobility that is not specifically and directly related to the eHUBS project, where permit systems is introduced, and for cars, mopeds, and bikes, there will be an availability of shared mobility in the city. And it's interesting to see in the coming half year what will happen with the eHUBS project in relation to this availability of shared mobility throughout the city. The other thing, of course, is that we'll be evaluating in the coming months where we're looking at whether the hub-based system is really the way to go, whether we should increase flexibility, so not specifically hub-located shared mobility. Maybe we can still use the eHUB as a sort of flagship for shared mobility or a gateway. But we do really want to keep the positive eHUBS name and brand recognition that we've achieved in Nijmegen and Arnhem, to try and keep that alive and see if we can use that to improve the use of shared mobility throughout the city. So yeah, that's our lessons learned from Arnhem and Nijmegen.
Thank you so much, Jasper, and quite an encouraging story overall, I would say. Any questions?
Thank you so much for your presentation. This question is actually for all three cities, but I wasn't sure how long you were going to be on. But when you're trying to, well, especially Martin, you were saying, trying to really target families, right? And I'm wondering, one of the things I haven't heard is, do these cargo bikes offer car seats for children? What are you doing about things like that? Is that maybe a reason why more families haven't converted or gotten rid of a car? Are those things that you've seen or heard from participants as maybe some of the accessories that they would need in order to, reduce their car usage? Or maybe not. I've heard this in other projects before that, having car seats or maybe even helmets is sometimes an issue for people.
Martin, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I think for us that would be. Is it working? Yeah. It's a question of security, I would say. The feedbacks we could learn from the users were that they were not comfortable on the e-cargo bikes on the streets, because we are working on improving the cycling lanes in the city, but we are still lacking of those lanes. So that's mainly the issue, I would say, and that's what is preventing families from using the cargo bags, because we are reluctant to put their children inside, and that's, we can understand that. So that would be, I think, the main point to improve for us is to really work on our infrastructure, which is really not satisfying up until now.
Jasper, any views?
Yeah, I think in Nijmegen the situation in that sense is different. When it comes to cycling infrastructure, I think we're at a different stage than other cities. So, for instance, bike helmets, I don't think is something that people really see as a necessity when it comes to renting cargo bikes or electric bikes. When you're talking about car seats, for instance, for the cargo bikes, they have systems where you can attach car seats or that sort of thing, like children's seats in the cargo bike, so to safely transport children. And the same goes for the cars, of course, where if people already have their own car seat, they can still use it. So I know that there are people that use their own car seat and then can use any kind of car, whether it's one they loaned or whether it's a shared car. From our behavioral change campaigns, we also did a lot of studies into what drives people to use the eHUBS or not. And these kind of issues were not really mentioned as reasons why people wouldn't use the shared vehicles. So yeah, I don't think that's something we recognized in Nijmegen specifically.
Let's come back to Manchester afterwards. Any further questions for Jasper?
Hi Jasper, glad you look healthy and you're still remotely here. I was wondering your idea about the critical mass and the scale, because the scale that you're doing in Nijmegen is not extremely small, but also not very large. And I was wondering what your idea is. For example, if there would have been 100 eHUBs, would the uptake be significantly higher?
I think that's a difficult question for me to ask, because I think that's part of what the MSPs, such as yourself, are more of an expert in. But I do think that you see for instance, when it comes to the cargo bikes, that once we moved from the 5 cargo bikes to the 300 cargo bikes, that of course in terms of total usage, it increased, although the usage per cargo bike when we only had 5 still was quite good. So it's difficult to really say. In the end, I think once you have a network that really functions as a good network, it really helps, and it makes availability and the guarantee of availability a lot stronger. So in that sense, I think that will increase user numbers. But I think the main value in expanding the amount of eHUBs and the amount of vehicles available lies in the operational costs for the MSPs that can be lower per vehicle. So in that sense, when it comes to the profitability of the shared mobility, I think expansion is really an issue and really something you need to look at. For the pilot project as such, I think this was a good number of eHUBs to really test out what works and what doesn't, and to move on from there.
So Jasper, partly bounce back the question to you. What are your views on your own question?
Yes, it's a good point. We think that you need a minimum amount to reach a kind of network effect, and also reliability for users to that they know if one vehicle is broken, that there is another one that's not too far away. So yes, Jasper optimistically said we had already 300 eHUBs, but I think the reality is there are 30.
Did I say 300?
Yeah,
My
you
apologies.
said 300.
30, of course, yes, 30.
But, yeah. But yes, I think more would work better. And for us as an operator, the difficult stage is of course, if we would now put 100, we have to overcome probably an adaptation period of maybe a year or maybe even 2 years until the level of usage comes to be sufficient to support that. And that's always the main difficulty with with shared mobility, I think.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to the third presentation, which will be the experiences of the city of Manchester, presented to us by Sarah. The floor is yours, Sarah.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm Sarah Committer. I'm a Senior Innovation Officer at Transport Greater Manchester. Oh, how do I get this to move? Yeah. So I thought I'd start off by just giving you a bit of information around what is Manchester actually like if people haven't ever been there before. So Greater Manchester, it's made up of 10 districts, and it's got a central city core, which you can see on the picture on the left there. It's a very highly diverse population. There's around 2.8 million people that live within Greater Manchester. 30% of those are from ethnic minorities, and 24% of those people are aged between 20 and 29. It's quite a large workforce of 7.2 million people living within a 50-mile radius. But it's a very diverse range of geographies. There's quite a rural areas to the Pennines in the west and a very bustling city centre. In terms of jobs and what sectors people work in Manchester, there's a thriving digital and technology sector. It's worth around 5 billion, and that's forecast to have a value over 7 billion by 2029. But in terms of journeys, there's more than 5.6 million journeys made across Greater Manchester in one typical day. So, therefore, why are eHUBs important? I think, as mentioned this morning, we're a very car-dominant city, so we're very keen to reduce some of this, and as a consequence, obviously reduce carbon emissions. But for eHUBs for us was extremely important in terms of other factors. So we really wanted to increase the use of shared e-mobility, definitely reduce the reliance on the private car, increase active travel and the benefits that are associated with that, but also give people the opportunity to try electric vehicles. So even if people want to transition to buying electric cars, give them the option to have a go at them, because I think there's still some fears about battery ranges and that they're not usable for their lifestyles. So we wanted to give people the option to try. Also, we want to create a blueprint for what it looks like for rolling out mobility hubs across the city in the future. And this gave us a really kind of rare opportunity to test some of the theories that we already had. So what does eHUBS look like in Greater Manchester? We got 25 e-cargo bikes from Cargaroo, and then once the project's finished in December this year, we'll have hopefully 12 electric vehicles operational. In terms of our approach, we worked very closely with the University of Delft and also our own, we have a strategic planning team, to look at areas where we thought the eHUBS would be most successful. So we looked at various factors such as current levels of public transport infrastructure, current levels of cycling in those areas, up to different things such as crime, antisocial behaviour levels, to kind of see where we thought they'd be most successful. You can see on the map that South Manchester came forward as being our most preferred option. In terms of demographics of people that live there, it's a more affluent area. So there were some concerns that we were focusing on too, like not spreading them too widely, but we just wanted to see how they would work. Unfortunately, the local authorities in the north of Manchester were not keen on the e-cargo bikes, so that's why we've got a split between the bikes and the cars, because we still wanted to see how the cars would work in other areas of Greater Manchester. In terms of our approach, we mainly did kind of a top-down approach, but we did also do consultation with local residents and properties when we had a short list of potential locations. But we started off mainly working with councillors and officers to understand where we thought which locations would be most successful. So we actually have 10 discrete eHUBs in Greater Manchester. You probably can't read that, but those 10 are broken down by name and then what consists in each hub. But we were very keen to kind of do a bit of experimentation in terms of our approach. We lent heavily on Cargaroo in terms of the e-cargo bikes, which they kind of stirred as in a neighbourhood approach, which Jasper mentioned, so that people can kind of rely on one bike being nearby if the bike that they usually use is rented. But we also did a number of test locations. So we actually have a couple of bikes outside a city central shopping location. We have another one outside a place called Unicorn Grocery, which is like an organic supermarket. And we also have quite a few bikes in the city central core, which is an as neighbourhood-based location, just to see how they differ between a more neighbourhood approach to a city central approach as well. Electric cars as well. Some of them are quite neighbourhood locations, but others are placed quite close to other forms of public transport. So we actually have one in a park and ride, which is close to our Metrolink, which is essentially a tram. So challenges, I'll start by our challenges. So site selection and achieving sign-off for these from councillors and key members of the city councils was initially quite difficult. I think it's because e-cargo bikes especially are quite a new form of transportation in the UK, and I think there was a little bit of scepticism around their potential success and what that might mean for people. So we did have to go through quite a lot of rounds of kind of convincing people about the positives of the scheme. So that did delay us quite a bit. As I mentioned, there was some concerns around the e-cargo bikes especially. I think for us, it was mainly safety concerns. There was concerns around, do we need to provide helmets for people? People have probably never ridden them. Do we need to provide training? There was a lot of scepticism around putting children in the front of them. So we kind of had to warm people up to the benefits. Antisocial behaviour was another concern. We mentioned earlier this morning around, I think Amsterdam said that they had free floating bikes and it didn't work that well for them. We had a similar scheme in Manchester called Mobike, and it's kind of haunted us to this day because it didn't go down very well. There was a lot of antisocial behaviour, lots of bikes in canals, and there was a concern that a similar thing might happen for this scheme. Also, Jasper mentioned COVID. That definitely impacted us as well. There was a delayed rollout of the EVs especially. We still haven't got our full fleet out, mainly due to contractor availability. There wasn't the resource available to install the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And as well, we've had a bit of feedback from charities and ward members, especially around usable pavement width. So as Tracy mentioned this morning, we're a Victorian city. We have very narrow pavements. And we did get the RNIB, which is the Royal Institute of Blind, I think that's the acronym, come and speak to us and say, you know, there is concerns around putting charging infrastructures on pavements and reducing pavement width. So that's something that we've definitely learned from this project in terms of, you know, viable pavement space and ensuring that, you know, areas are accessible for everyone. So I actually don't have a slide in terms of usage data. I should have put that in, but in terms of the cargo bikes, we have been very pleasantly surprised. I think everyone at TFGM are very happy with how it's gone. We've had over 700 registrations, and I think there's over 500 active users, which for a fleet of 25 bikes that went live in October last year, we're really impressed with. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're on par with Nijmegen and Amsterdam based on fleet size. So we're very happy with how the cargo bike operation has gone. In terms of electric vehicles, we've only got 4 operational in terms of our whole fleet, but we've had over 150 bookings in that period and over 8,000 miles completed in those cars. So again, very pleased with how the eHUBS project has performed. But in terms of key lessons learned for us, early engagement with local authorities, officers and councillors to kind of warm them up to the scheme, the benefits and what that means for them as policymakers. I think in hindsight, if we'd brought them along on the journey from an earlier stage, would have helped us in terms of securing locations earlier. Jasper mentioned branding. We created a branding strategy all around the colour yellow because we have something called the B network in Manchester, which is all yellow and black. So we wanted to create a brand for shared mobility and make it recognisable. And that was really, I think, helpful for people when they kind of see the hub, that they recognise this yellow and black branding. I think an awareness of the actual market that you're operating in is always helpful. And as I mentioned, the electric vehicle market in the UK is at the moment very congested and there's quite a lot of delays across a number of projects. So I think just that awareness piece, and just as I mentioned, a recognition that new forms of transportation are probably going to be met with maybe some scepticism and worry, and just bringing people along on the journey of other cities that have successfully deployed things like e-cargo bikes is really helpful for getting things in. In terms of that recognition piece, we did a lot of work on the e-cargo bike side of things. We actually offer now free training for people who want to have an hour session with a dedicated trainer on the e-cargo bikes for free. So we've funded that through the project. And we also have a series of YouTube videos on a dedicated website that kind of do a step-by-step guide to, firstly, just renting the bike, secondly, how to use it safely, but also if you've got children, how to safely secure them in the cargo unit and how to ride with them safely. Similar as well, we've done a number of promotional campaigns. So we've done a lot on social media in terms of targeted advertising. So we did that based on location. And we tested different forms of campaign material as well. So we used our videos, but we also have tried to kind of align them with like events that are happening. So a couple of weeks ago in the UK, it was the Queen's Jubilee. So we posted lots of pictures of the cargo bikes with a corgi in the thing, and it seemed to go down very well. We also did a Valentine's campaign about travel to your date by Cargaroo, which as well went down quite well. So we've tried to be quite clever in our approach, which seems to work quite well. But also the importance of kind of tailored campaigns. So we've got a mixture of more formal stuff like posters, leaflets, but also kind of this other more kind of using the social media to reach different people and different demographics. So what are our future plans? As I mentioned, we're developing, oh no, I didn't actually mention this, we're developing a shared mobility strategy and roadmap, so what that looks like in terms of how we roll out shared mobility in the city. As well as eHUBS, we also have a Lime scooter trial taking place in Salford, and we also want to develop more car clubs, so that's definitely forming part of our future shared mobility strategy. We're also working with Bury Council and the NHS to understand how we could use EVs as part of like a grey fleet, so their staff can use the vehicles as part of their journeys to and from work, and if they need to go on any trips during the working day, just to kind of increase their usage. We're also developing a site selection tool which maps areas of high potential for mobility hubs. So that's kind of building on the work that we did with the University of Delft just to kind of really understand where mobility hubs are likely to be successful. And also the mass element is very important for us. We still have everything on separate apps, so we really want to understand how we can integrate that to make it more usable for the end user. And that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah? Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I never know how to speak to these. Thank you so much. Question to you, but also to others. It's more about pricing and also the. Do you have any statistics on the, let's say, socio-demographic breakdown of users? And specifically, how does it compare, for example, to people living in the neighborhoods where you put those, and also people in the city? So as you mentioned, for example, that the cargo bikes were in a more affluent area. Mm-hmm. I think in Amsterdam it's also, I think, in the Pipe and a bit around. So is there any really, from a city point of view, do you have any intervention in terms of what the pricing is, what it should be, like things around that?
I mean, I think for us it was still very much an experiment because we've never had anything like this before, and I think we were very much led by Cargaroo's pricing strategy. They kind of dictated that, but in terms of the usage, we don't actually break down. We don't know, what backgrounds people come from when they're booking. So that I think that is a bit of a challenge for us because we don't know, and I think because we have focused on the more affluent area as well, that is a gap in our knowledge, and it's something that we do recognise. I don't know whether you've got any. Sharon, whether you want to add to that?
Amsterdam, yes.
Yeah, from no, okay.
But any ballpark guess, kind of understanding of the users?
Well, from what I've seen, it's been mainly young families that are using it, but we don't really know. So sorry.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Thanks for a great presentation. My question is, you brought up bike helmets there earlier. Mm-hmm. What was your conclusion around providing helmets or not providing helmets?
We decided that we couldn't force people to wear helmets because in the UK, obviously, you don't have to wear helmets to ride a normal bike on the road. So we decided we couldn't. And also to have to provide a helmet when that's not part of Cargaroo's normal business model kind of would have been an extra cost for us, and also who maintains them. If they get damaged, are we then liable if someone does injure themselves? So it opened like a whole can of worms, and because it isn't a necessity in the UK anyway to ride a bike, we decided not to force that. But you can probably, it's not on there now, but in the photos that we used to promote the scheme, we used a mixture of people riding with helmets and not riding with helmets, just to show that, if you want to, it is an option, but we didn't enforce it.
Has there been any ramifications?
No, nothing. We've not had any accident information from Cargaroo, and we speak with them weekly, so we've not had any impact from that.
Very much a cultural thing as well, the helmet wearing. I think there was another raised hand somewhere around here. Was it you?
I feel a bit sorry for asking question again. Thank you, Sarah, for your presentation. I'm very happy with positive impact, and I was also impressed by the effort that you have done to encourage people to use it, and I like the videos very much. My question is actually, how do you see this in other neighborhoods? Do you think that this is something which will be restricted to affluent areas, or do you also see in the less socially economic areas that there is also a need for the service?
Yeah, it is a challenge. I think some areas like South Manchester are very open to this kind of thing, and people want it and they adopt it. But I think potentially other areas, it's more of a challenge. We actually had, it's different, but the Lime scooter trials, we split across Salford and Rochdale. So Rochdale is more of a kind of more socially deprived area, just to see how it would go. They did perform well, not as well, but we're still trying to pave the way to kind of spread it across the whole of Greater Manchester. So I think our appetite and our desire is to have it across all areas, and this is kind of give us the information we needed to show it does work. So how can we encourage people in other areas? And I think we're just going to hopefully, fingers crossed, just gradually spread it across everywhere. And that campaign materials and that awareness piece is something that we really need to focus on. So.
And I think something to explore in the future is definitely also whether we shouldn't be subsidizing trips for people who otherwise would not be able to afford using these new services and are eligible for social benefits, for example, and that way we could be subsidizing trips. We need to wrap up because otherwise you won't have time for a coffee before we go to the plenary session again. So please join me in thanking the speakers once more. Thanks a lot.